Good afternoon and welcome to the latest edition of the Battlestar Galactica franchise documentary. This evening I'm delighted to be joined by the one and only Mary McDonnell, who played the role of President Laura Roslin in the remake of the legendary sci-fi series Battlestar Galactica. And I suppose, Mary, in terms of senior priority, in terms of the cast of Battlestar Galactica, there was a three, what I would call the Stoogers, in terms of yourself, Michael Hogan, and Eddie Olmos, and then the three sort of well-renowned, sort of real established stars, and then a real budding sort of young cast, young wannabe, hungry sort of actors, and it really led to a good blend. And from what I've gathered so far, speaking to all the sort of young, they really sort of lent on your sort of experience, especially through the first season, coming to yourself and coming to Michael and coming to Eddie for advice when necessary.
So are you asking me what my experience was of the younger actors? And is that what you're asking?
Yeah, as an established star at the time, yourself and Eddie and Michael.
Yeah, well, you know, we were definitely aware, Eddie and Michael and I were definitely aware, particularly Ed and I, because we were in full throttle right from the beginning, and Michael became a regular as time went on. And so what I remember very clearly was that particularly Ed, also because of who he was playing, took on a kind of open leadership role. Like he went beyond everyone. Like, do you know what I mean? Like he sort of took on the role of commander so completely that he kind of held the company. I came in and out a lot, and because I was, if you remember at the beginning, my character was never on the Galactica. I was on Colonial One with a couple of people, so I didn't work all the time with this company. I saw them at the beginning and then every once in a while. So my relationship to it was a little bit different. What I do remember though is that we would be doing a scene. I remember one time with Grace Parks, and I remember how much these brilliant young actors, because of their lack of experience, underestimated themselves. That's what I saw. So I remember one time completely losing my lines, as every actor does, and particularly when you get to be a respected older one, you forget. And I completely forgot. And I was like, I can't remember these damn lines to save my life. And Grace Parks literally stopped and said, oh my God, I can breathe again. I can breathe again. If you don't remember your lines, then we're going to be okay. And I realized in that moment that how scared they all were, or not even scared, how deeply committed they were to doing well, and how unaware they were at how easy that would be for them. You know what I mean? They were all so freaking talented, but what you only gain a trust in your own talent through years of doing it over and over, and knowing that you just jump into the unknown and your talent will serve you again and again. You don't have to keep an achievement level in mind. In fact, that will block you. So I think what I found was the thing I tried to do the most was relax them and to trust in themselves, because they're all of them were just potentially fantastic. They had great instincts. It was such good casting. And so to me, it was just a matter of, first of all, being open with them about how vulnerable everyone is as an actor. You know, you make mistakes, you screw up, you say the wrong line, you aren't satisfied with a take, and all of those things, the more Eddie and I let those things be visible to the younger cast, the more relaxed they could become with their own process, because that's all it is. It's really developing over years a trust in your process, and part of your process is to do the bad takes that you then turn to the director and say, please don't print that. That sucked. I want to do something else. So, but you learn that. And so I think just being visible to them and honest in front of them was what I remember being able to do, and what I remember how quickly they grew. they just grew like weeds in their own confidence. And it was a beautiful thing to see. Eddie was a lot more of a mentor in terms of the business itself and in pointing out to them how special this was. Because they don't know. I mean, they knew, but they didn't, because they hadn't been through the bad ones yet. You know, Ed and I, and Michael, we've done a lot of, you know, like, so a lot of them have been great. We've been lucky. So that's why we still have careers and we're respected, but you always have the bad ones. And some of these people hadn't experienced that yet. So he was very good at giving them perspective and kind of grounding them in the level of importance of the story they were telling.
And I suppose, Mary, in terms of Ronald Moore, in terms of pitching this sort of Laura Roslin character to you and his sort of vision for Laura, I suppose Laura wasn't evident in the original Battlestar Galactica. This was a creation of sort of Ronald Moore to bring her in terms of this president of the 12 colonies and such. And in terms of sitting down with you and Ronald, having that sort of discussion face to face, how did he sort of pitch this Laura Roslin character that made you saying, yeah, this is something I really want to do?
What he did was, in a very gracious and subtle manner, because that is Ron Moore, he explained to me how much he admired the possibility of having a woman, or a man really, but in this case it was a woman, be thrust into power ill prepared for power, and to watch her discover that she had innate leadership that she didn't perhaps know or care to know before, and to watch her overcome that. And also, he was very interested in historically and in therefore fictionally in creating this, the leader that must disguise an illness. Leadership having to protect something that makes them vulnerable, that could influence, in this case, the survival of the human race. You know what I mean? She needed to stay in that role as long as possible. And and if people knew that she had cancer, it would cast doubt on her ability to lead. And that could be the end of the human race in this case, not just the end of a political 4-year run or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he was interested in those things, and particularly the idea of, and for me, particularly the idea of a woman of my age, my generation. Many of us have grown into power that we weren't necessarily brought up to assume we had, because we were right on the cusp of young women being brought up to know that they could do whatever they want and be whatever they want and assume power. My generation was right on the cusp. I was fortunate that I was raised in a family of 5 sisters and 1 brother, and he's fabulous. But my father was, women can do anything. Had I not had that, had I not been in the kind of community I was raised in the 50s, I don't think my life would have looked quite the way it is. And I have a group of really powerful sisters who all assumed that they could break barriers and do whatever they wanted and wanted to take on a lot of power. So to me, it was interesting to explore a woman who was obviously very bright and talented, but who never had an ambition towards an event like this or this leadership, and to find it in her, unbeknownst to her, was very exciting. And also I asked him at that face-to-face, I said, but you have to be honest with me, Ron. I mean, she's got terminal cancer. So is this a short job or a long job? And he told me that it was in fact she was going to be there till they found Earth. And he did it. Isn't that lovely?
That was indeed a lovely sort of fairy tale, a sort of journey for the character Laura Roslin. Tell me about arriving the first day on set in terms of Battlestar Galactica and seeing the sets they had. Were you blown away by the whole auticity. I know Eddie had a big role to play in it in terms of the sets. He looked over everything and sort of looked to have really like the Battlestar to be like an old sort of Rex sort of warrior machine, to have butts and cranks and all sorts of things. It was sort of resemble. He went over everything with a fine tooth comb with Ronald Moore. Were you taken back when you actually saw the sets of Battlestar Galactica? Speaking to numerous of cast, Paul Campbell told me he got lost and nearly bumped into Trish. Went into near Trish Helfer's changing room. Michael Trucco and Aaron Douglas said 20 or 25 minutes one day they were just walking around not knowing where to go. How did you find the sets in Battlestar Galactica? Were they some of the best you were ever on?
Oh, they were extraordinary. And like I said, in the very beginning, I wasn't on the Battlestar. I was on Colonial One, which also felt like it was in a separate town. So do you know what I mean? So I would just go to Colonial One to work. And then the first time I had to work on the Battlestar, I think was pretty quick. It was on 13, episode 13, yeah. And I absolutely got lost. I could not get out for lunch. I ended up, finally got out because I take a long time to come down from work. Like I don't rush to lunch when they say you're broken for lunch. I usually kind of go into a kind of transition where before I start talking to people and having fun, if I'm even going to do that, because I'm a bit of a hermit when I work, I'll go back to my chair and I'll take time and I'll let people rush out. I'm not really super social on a set. I'm very social in life, but not when I'm working. And so I went to my chair, and there's only a couple crew people left and they're doing this and that. And I said, which way is out? And they said, that way. And I said, okay, thanks guys. See you after lunch. And I started walking and there was nobody on the ship.
Okay.
Nobody. And I could not find my way out. And I did not have a microphone. I did not have a walkie. And I remember that I kept coming back again and again to the break room, but it seemed like I was coming from a different, angle each time. I finally got out of the ship and out of the, of the lot or the actual soundstage. And I was in the back there. I was not in the front. There were no actors. And it was right up against another soundstage. So then I had to walk all the way around a different side of the soundstage and come around a back alley and walk down between two other sound stages and then come all the way back down.
You really got lost.
That was real. And I was completely alone. So it was kind of both funny and a little out of body. It felt a little like Twilight Zone. Like there was a moment where I was like, is this a dream? Because it felt like an actor's nightmare. Like you were trying to get to set, or you have a nightmare that you can't find your costume and you walk on a stage naked. It had that panic in it, even though I was clearly on the sound stage. It was very funny. It was very impressive, very, very impressive. And you never had to imagine much. Like I would look out of Colonial One all day long and be surprised when I came into the sunlight and I wasn't looking at the galaxies and just a sea of stars. That's what I absolutely hadn't a clue what time it was ever when I was working on that show.
I suppose, Mary, in terms of your process on Battlestar Galactica, you deal with everything from cancer to abortion to presidential races to rigging, assassinations, to your sidekick being your Billy, your next in line, meeting his demise, to actually be showing ruthlessness in terms of airlocking Cylons out of ships. In terms of your character, every different week we saw a different angle, a different perspective on her. One time she was a nice, sort of caring president, but other times then she would go against the trend in terms of her character, in terms of Starbuck. She doubted Starbuck on several times. When she, no doubt she was a favorite of Adam as probably his daughter as such, but she probably
Yeah.
just didn't really have that sort of connection with her. She had more of a connection with Adama's son, probably more of a connection with Adama's son than even Adama had with his sort of son. So she was a very sort of hard character to guess where she was going from episode to episode.
Yes. So to answer that for you, she wasn't hard for me to know where she was going, because if you look back at it again and you look at what decision Laura makes, even though it might seem wildly different from a compassionate Laura that you saw in another situation, she was not a leader of personality. She was a leader of situation. And each decision she made was based on her gut feeling or the information connected to her gut feeling about whether or not this would lead to survival of the human race or not. And whenever she felt that that idea was threatened, she made her choice. And if that meant it was a cold and ruthless choice and didn't show compassion or warmth to a particular individual, she just was able to compartmentalize. I think that was the thing that Mary had to really develop an understanding of being capable of compartmentalizing to the extent that she was kind of brilliant at it. And I'm not. Mary McDonnell is not. I'm kind of empathic and all over the place. She had an innate ability to separate the personal from the professional, from the survival, and she always behaved according to what would come back to that central idea. If I do this, does it help us survive? If I do that, does it help us survive? And, politics be damned. And she was not a politician. She was trying to fulfill a job that she'd been thrust into. So she didn't really care how much people liked her or not, which I found so refreshing.
And I suppose, Mary, in terms of Ron Moore, going back to that sort of early sort of discussion, did he sort of pitch from day one the sort of mutual attraction between yourself and Adama, or is that something that developed maybe after 2 or 3 seasons that decided to write that into the script?
It really was, I think it wasn't, no, he didn't, I don't think he really saw that that's where we would go. He just knew that he immediately wanted to polarize us so that we could have that conflict. And I think it really was about a kind of innate chemistry that Eddie and I had that started to become part of the equation no matter what he wrote. That there was just, these people had some kind of energy together, which Ed and I do. And he just leaned into it eventually, and it started to become something that people felt about their potential almost before he was ready to write it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it kind of evolved organically. In my opinion, Eddie would probably tell you that it was his idea. And if he was sitting here, he would laugh. So that's good.
Mary, I suppose in terms of Battlestar Galactica, it touched on every subject, but also the whole notion of comedy, and comedy was provided, I suppose, by James Callis's character, Baltar. In terms of improv sort of comedy, in terms of I suppose in terms of portraying what it is to sort of be in a mental institution and losing your mind, and in terms of portraying that and being able talking to yourself, and what was that actually like to look at on sort of set?
Well, let me just say that James Callis is, and I'm sure you know this about him already, but I'd like to restate it because it's worth it and he earned it. He is one of the wittiest people on the planet. So he himself is so deeply funny, and it comes out of the moment constantly. It's always surprising. His sense of humor has an element of surprise and kind of a quirk in it that he was able to use in Baltar. So he took Baltar from someone who could have been just kind of a crabby, disturbed, in love, passionate person, and gave him this incredible life that was so charming in its, his sense of humor is completely disarming. He's so funny. So even if Baltar wasn't particularly being funny in a scene, which in a lot of the scenes with Laura Roslin, Baltar was not happy. So he wasn't being, he wasn't doing anything particularly unusual, except for when, he was talking to Six and she wasn't there. I had more trouble with that than he did. He had no trouble sort of imagining all of this. I was like, how do I, the actress, Mary McDonnell, pretend that I'm not standing next to this wonderful, beautiful woman in a red dress? I'm sitting here in the same Armani suit that I've had for 3 months. And I'm looking and I'm not supposed to see her. Michael Reimer, a brilliant director, is like, well, it's a job, isn't it? Yeah, that's a job. James just kept everyone up, no matter what. He was always brilliant and funny, and also very, very serious about the work. He was very specific. He was just a delight to be around, but you really had to hold it together because he would make you laugh simply with a look or the way he asked your character a question. He's just a delight.
I suppose, Mary, in terms of those promising actors on the show, they have all gone on to have successful sort of careers so far, and some are doing very well, and some stars are bright and shine. But in the original 1978, the 80 series of Battlestar Galactica, the main sort of principal character, Starbuck, was played by Dirk Benedict. And I suppose at the time, Dirk Benedict, a huge star, we all know him from Templeton Peck as the A-Team, as sort of a real prominent star in his own sort of right. When Battlestar Galactica was, when they were directing the show and casting, and when Ron Moore decided to trust the Starbuck character as a woman, there was a bit of initial sort of outrage and a bit of action, as if to say, well, how could this work? We were looking to see another sort of Templeton Peck sort of charisma, sort of that Starbuck, as we know. But Katie Sackhoff absolutely smashed the role, killed the role. And in terms of shining her star just after Battlestar Galactica just went through the roof in terms of Hollywood and stuff like that. And she's still very much heavily involved in that. But she absolutely, everyone now Starbuck, it's Katie Sackhoff. It's no longer Dirk Benedict. Dirk Benedict is even forgotten about in terms of that role.
Yeah. I think Katie's everything about Katie, the level of her talent, the level of her intelligence, her youthfulness, and the timing of Ron Moore's genius in making Starbuck a woman. At a time in our culture where this was the moment where women were beginning to rise. It was right then. And so the resistance to that at the beginning was actually kind of exciting, because that always shows you that, ooh, this is pushing buttons, therefore it's going to be very exciting. And Katie's fearlessness about all of that created the potential for the Starbuck that you ended up seeing, because she made her fearless. She made her fierce. She didn't do anything with Starbuck that allowed you to go, oh, that's a woman trying to play a man. She just played this passionate, strong, complicated, desperate, brilliant human being. She just said, that's it, I'm a warrior. I'm a warrior. And because Katie could do that, it changed the whole idea of what we think Starbuck is and who Starbuck is. And it just moved on in time and space. It was the time for Starbuck to be the woman, and Katie was the actress to play her.
I suppose, Mary, in terms of Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, it was so successful. I mean, you touched on so many sort of human emotions and human aspects of modern day human life. You touched on it all, really, from suicide to abortion to cancer to rape to robberies to deaths to new life. But in terms of going forward with the franchise, did you cover every angle in terms of the franchise, if someone was looking at new directors or new creative writers and are looking to say, how can we do now going into 2021? How can we do take another angle on the Battlestar Galactica? Have you sort of done it so, covered it so well that it's maybe impossible for anyone to take another objective or another sort of look at it in terms of that, or take out a sort of movie? Because it is this, the seasons are so in depth, it makes you wonder how you could sort of emulate what she did.
I think on the one hand, what you're saying is very true, that it was so complete and full, but I think it's actually ripe for expansion. I actually think there's all kinds of ways. Once it's the right time, I do think you will see a lot more of this franchise. That's my opinion. And I know we're waiting now to see what Sam Esmail is going to do with a sort of different incarnation of the same idea. He won't be using apparently our characters, but it will be within the same legend. And then I think he will begin, I personally think, and in discussions I've had with many people, that there's all kinds of possibility in taking certain parts of Battlestar and going this way with it. There's a lot of story that has not been told that it can be contained within those years, in my opinion.
And I suppose, Mary, the last sort of question now before I let you go, and probably this is one I finish on these interviews on, and it's probably one of the hardest questions I'll ask you. Let's pretend there was a Battlestar Galactica encyclopedia, a dictionary of sorts, and they put your character, President Laura Roslin, in the encyclopedia, and they left 2 blank sentences underneath. And they asked you, Mary McDonnell, having portrayed your role of Laura Roslin, to write those 2 sentences to sum her up. What would you like those 2 sentences to read?
The first sentence would be, Laura Roslin was a woman who was given an opportunity to understand the vulnerabilities of power. And the second sentence would be, Laura Roslin was a woman who, despite all odds, fell deeply in love at the end of her life.
Mary, some people would give a paragraph that came so easy to you in terms of those 2 sentences. You didn't have,
I know her well.
You didn't flinch. You didn't even flinch.
Yeah.
Mary, an absolute pleasure talking to you today, to relive your memories of playing President Laura Roslin in Battlestar Galactica, such an iconic franchise. We're delighted to hear your perspective on the playing Laura Roslin. Thank you so much for giving your time and contributing to the series. And Mary, hopefully it'll be a prosperous time in 2021 for you, and you can get back along the streets of Los Angeles and take in the joys that it has. And who knows, maybe a trip to Ireland as well.
Oh, we definitely will come and do a convention as soon as we can. Yeah.
Mary, pleasure. Stay safe, and hopefully, please God, speak to you sometime in the near future.
You too, sir. Thank you so very much.
Cheers.
Bye.